K24 TV, and our WhatsApp number right there on your screen. So before we proceed with our conversation, I'd like to read some of your responses from Facebook, and we have a couple here. Thank you so much for interacting with us. We appreciate you. And I want to read from Isaac Masharia here, and he says, we are prone to stress, traumas, peer pressure, and other mental illnesses unlike there before, exposure being a major cause. All right. Mungeria Dan says unemployment is a major factor, driving many young people towards drug abuse. Without opportunities, they often seek escape in harmful situations, and we need to address the issue urgently by creating more job opportunities and support systems for our youth. All right. Newton Kibira says it's hard to stay idle and jobless and sober at the same time, so it's better to get high on drugs. Others do it for fun, and mostly peer pressure. Zimantai says the reason is simple: stressful life, and we cannot face it in sober state. And Kevo Kipla says because of the pressure of trying to be financially stable, which leads to depression, and that's where the drugs starts coming from. There are a couple. I'll try to read them, towards, of course, the end of our conversation. But as we move on, Boniface, she was saying a point, so I'll come back to you, Kimberly. Boniface, what happens to your physiological structure over time when you're using? What happens to your body?
So, there are obviously stages that we go through in the process of using. So usually most people start off with just trying, curiosity, and you want a puff of cigarette. We call them gateway drugs. A puff of cigarette looks harmless. Shisha looks very harmless. A glass of wine looks very harmless. And at the age between the age of 14 to about 18, 21, most people are trying. And usually that is really harmless. What we don't know is that it already is beginning to affect our brains.
I see.
Yes, because if we overexpose ourselves, during that period of time is when the brain of a young person is really growing. Between the ages of, the brain stops growing at about 25. So substance abuse starts to affect the mind. Of course, then we move on to the next stage, which is usually social use, and as it becomes every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it still looks very harmless. Although there are some experiences which can begin to excavate the problem. Some experiences could be sometimes people, when they start using, they could drink drive and then have an accident.
I see.
Yeah, it is possible that a young girl during that period of time can get herself in a very tricky situation and lose her virginity. It's possible some young men can go and start sexual behaviors and expose themselves without using a condom. So those thought processes begin to harm the person, and the more they need to use to forget what happened.
I see.
Yeah? And that is when the problem now begins to take a route of its own. Addiction is described as a compulsive, obsessive problem, as an obsession of the mind and a compulsion to use.
I see. So it makes your senses all geared to one thing. You basically cannot articulate any other. You just want what you want.
Yes.
It changes your whole physiological.
Yes. So by the time you get into real problem, it has really begun. People start to lose their weight because they're not eating as often as they should. You see some people probably put on too much more weight because they're drinking so much and eating so much. Some people, sleeping patterns are affected, and because of the experiences of the substance abuse, sometimes the problem just takes a life of its own, and the substances that we are using take a hold of our lives. So we begin to live to use, as we say, and use to live.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is now where the problem has really got into an addiction stage, and it becomes harder to leave, harder to stop, and we need help.
Okay.
So
Almost
sometimes
like a
it
form
is
of
best,
yeah.
because I listened to some of those feedback that we got. Just remember, because we in our programs we remind people that, you know, there's nothing so bad that drugs won't make worse. Your unemployment can be a problem, yeah. But when we use and start using drugs and get into an addiction problem,
Makes it
now we
work.
become unemployable. No.
Like it's, oh wow.
Yeah.
So it regenerates, like it
Yes.
degenerates rather
Yes.
into something completely
Yes.
worse than you thought
Yes.
you're coping.
Yes. So whatever it is that we begin to use for,
Yeah.
it eventually ends up making it worse. Yeah. So if it was unemployment that made us use, after a while we become unemployable. We can't even get employed.
And you once did narrate that you lost a job.
Oh yes.
That you're
Oh,
doing.
yes. You know, I work for Eden House. Eden House for the last 16 years is a rehabilitation center. That's the only job I have managed without being fired. I used to be fired and you know that is after people have people have really tried to stomach me. Yeah, and so I did get very good jobs, you know.
Yeah.
Like I had a very good job with Unilever. I managed 6 months. They had to fire me, and it was not because of performance, because my performance was very good. Just behavior. You know, they would say, "Hey, Boniface, even if you are performing well, come on, you can't go to a distributor drunk. You know, you can't go leave your car in a bar parked outside and it has our logo." Yeah, you know. Your behavior is really reflecting badly on the company. Yeah, so can you try and do something about it? And the more they give me ultimatums, the harder it becomes for me to really change my own behavior. So there's no job. I got about 3-4 jobs that I managed a year, apart from this one of helping other addicts get clean.
I see.
And we have helped now over 5,000 people.
Wow.
We help many people in recovery. I can't wait for Kimberly someday to join me.
Yeah. And now, after hearing all that, Kimberly,
Yes.
can you relate, you know, in the sense of basically how you start using to cope, and then your life gets worse? Like you said, you didn't finish uni, then you came back to Kenya from South Africa, got into USIU, going to another university, and it's been a roller coaster. Although you're back in school now, right?
I'm back in school now.
You're back in school.
I'm almost graduating November 30th, inshallah. I'll be an addiction counselor at SAPTA, so I thank God. I really related to what he said. You know, what keeps us going back is the tolerance. At some point, when I use cocaine today for the first time, maybe I'm using it as just experimental, my brain, dopamine will be released. The second time I'll use that cocaine, my brain would already have locked that in memory and released less dopamine receptors and will release less dopamine. So I will not feel the way I felt the first time. So I'll keep trying to chase that high. As heroin addicts, we say chasing the dragon. The first time you use heroin, you fly. You are just, woo. But then the second time you use it, it's less of that feeling is less. So you keep trying to chase that feeling you once had, and wanting the same amount of dopamine to be released. But your brain, you know, is adapting to this excessive dopamine. Yeah. So it is trying to regulate the dopamine in your brain by lessening the dopamine release. So you'll keep wanting more and more. An alcoholic starts by maybe drinking a beer, and they could get drunk off a beer. But as their disease progresses, it gets to a point where they have to drink, I don't know how many mzingas of Smirnoff just to feel something, you know. That's where you look at somebody and you're like, are you going to die? He doesn't know he's going to die because he's not feeling the effects anymore. He needs more and more to feel the effects. So I completely relate. And I got to a point where I was injecting the heroin. When I entered the drug den, I remember I was such a show-off. I would see people injecting themselves and judge them. You know, even Mr. Boniface has showed me his track lines, and I'm shocked. I didn't believe he's ever used heroin until he showed me the lines on his hand. So I used to enter the drug den and I would really judge people who inject themselves and look down upon them and be like, oh, never, that can never be me. I will never inject. But sooner or later, I had to take the needle and inject because smoking heroin and sniffing heroin was not giving me the same effect. So I wanted something that was going to go direct into my bloodstream. So I started injecting, and then it got to a point where now I was using maybe 10 sachets a day. I'm now using 20 sachets a day, up to 30 sachets a day, you know.
And when did you feel that now, okay, this is the time I need to start reevaluating all this? When did you come to this side of Kimberly, this version of you, who we are seeing right now? Because you said you started slow, small, keep going high, chase. You've done things that you looked, you know, down on other people.
Yes, yes.
You know, but now you're here. So when did you come to this other side?
How did I cross over?
Yeah.
There's something called rock bottom, and you know, for a lot of addicts, and Boniface will tell you the same, a lot of us can't even recognize when rock bottom. It's our loved ones, our friends and families who say, you are going to die. An addict doesn't see that, you know, because you'll only believe it once you actually believe it. That's why I really support families who just take their loved one to rehab, whether voluntary or not, because sometimes somebody will head to death without their knowledge. I was in that situation where I was heading to my death. I wasn't seeing it. Everybody around me was seeing it. And you know, it gets to a point where I was bundled to rehab with policemen. I have been taken with all sorts of ways. It gets to a point where families are tired. They're also sick. So they let me go. When they let me go, I was also, I reached the point where I said, you know what, I'm just waiting for my overdose. I had 2 previous overdoses and I didn't die. So I was just waiting for the next one to take me away. You know, I'd already reconciled with my reality and said, this is it, you know. I felt like I've done so much damage in the past. I've hurt so many people. I have stolen from so many people. I have manipulated. I have lost so many jobs, as he said, that I'll never be able to recover my life again. It's over. But then something happened, something very spiritual happened to me. I was going to the drug den in the morning to buy my drugs, and I ran into a mechanic at a garage. The garage is outside the drug den. And he just asked me to pray for me. I wanted money. I kept telling him, if you're going to pray for me, I'm going to buy me tea. You're going to give me 60 bob for tea. Because I wanted to add 60 bob on top. I get 2 sachets of heroin and whatever. So he starts praying for me, and he prayed for me. I can't even tell how long I was there for when this man was praying for me. But he finally stopped praying, and something shifted inside of me. I always say, something completely changed. My mindset, my spirit, my everything changed inside of me. Even when I'd gone to sit down to use the drugs, I wasn't comfortable anymore on that stone I was sitting in. You know, the drug dens are very ugly places. You know, there's human waste, there's needles all over the ground, there's blood, there are people walking in with broken hands. So I looked around, and I was really now seeing this rock bottom. I was seeing now what people were seeing. And something really changed in me, and I decided to seek for treatment and seek for help. And it's been a process. As he said, we have such terrible behaviors. You know, living in the street for all those years, you adapt to the street life. You adapt to being, you know, dog-eat-dog world, you know. It's me first, not you, you know. I'm staking before you take for me. So it's insane, such horrible behavior. So it's been 2 years of me working on myself on a day-to-day basis.
I see.
Yes.
I see. I can appreciate that, Kimberly. Now, she's given her account very, very clear. It's a very clear perspective. And Boniface, you know, your biography, I still have it, like from 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the key things you wrote on there is you were in a den some years ago, and you saw someone else overdose, and the only thing you're thinking is, I need to steal. You know, pickpockets and, you know, get something. But I think this conversation is so stigmatic that when you read it as a person maybe you've never used, or someone who has used, or whichever situation you may be, you almost don't want to see, you know, what you're saying. So what happens to families? Like she said, your family becomes sick, right? Just as you are sick. What does, in your perspective, because you've been there, what do the families go through, or your family went through?
I think the saddest for me was the mother of my son. That was the closest person at the time. My sisters, of course, one of my sisters decided to get married. She was not even ready for, thank God she got married, at least. She's still with the same man. Okay. And they have 3 other children. Right. But she told me later that I just looked at you and thought, I want to run away. I don't want to see you going through that. So she decided to get married at 18, just because she thought she didn't want to see me and using. My wife, at the time, I had a son who was 4 years. She had to leave me. I can understand why she had to ask for a transfer to Mombasa. We are very good friends now, and my son is with me. But I lost, that was the closest. My mom had died. My cousins, after a while, just closed down because they don't know how to help you. And they can't welcome you at home because, you're going to steal.
Yes.
Like me, I would steal. I would take something, very small things, to be honest. Sometimes even the Bible. The Bible is a lot of money.
Like sell the Bible?
Yeah. I would pick up the Bible, and when you're reading the Bible, everyone just thinks, oh, this guy is getting saved. But I'm looking at how I'm going to sell it. Yeah, imagine.
Wow. And you'd
So
quote scripture and
families,
everything
yes.
like that?
Yeah, families sometimes begin to blame themselves. Yeah, I've seen now from my work, I see some families begin to look at what is it they missed out on. Maybe the work was too much, they were not. With my work now, I see some better families than where I come from. And they really can go through a lot of second guessing themselves, and sometimes it's not their journey, it is not something that they caused. Sometimes there are times it is. Some close down just like mine did, and to protect themselves. And families need therapy. Yeah, we started a family program at Eden House every first Saturday. Every Sunday at C12, we have a meeting for families called Al-Anon. This is very helpful for families to understand how best to help the alcoholic or drug addicts in their lives, how to protect themselves too, not necessarily, just become enablers, not to become haters also of their own children, but how to love while still, having a distance from the problem, because and how to separate the problem from their loved ones. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Like to separate the use and this particular, individual.
Yes.
Really?
So
how do you, create that? How do you impart that psychology also? Because I don't think it's easy, in this day and age. When something is bad, everyone like kinda.
Yeah. So most families go through the whole process. By the time the person gets into a rehab setting, most rehabilitation centers insist on having a family program. In our center at Eden, we insist that families must get involved. In fact, I had someone who wrote a book recently. It takes a family. It takes a family for recovery to happen.
Right.
Because as she said earlier, and I mentioned also my background, you look at some of the underlying issues really emanating from our childhood and our families.
Yeah, even the feedback, we have, it's most young people are saying the childhood traumas, most of them. Yeah,
childhood trauma, circumstances at home, neglect. Sometimes also there are some people who are essentially predisposed. There's a component of predisposition even with all the perfect upbringing. Some people can be predisposed to substance abuse. Their mental health structure is such that if they pick up a drink or a drug, they have a compulsive obsessive disorder. It's almost like integral in how they are made up, created. So the moment they pick up, some, not everyone, some people it is, even with a perfect upbringing, even with the affinity to substance abuse is very strong. So you'll find some families also who are very good, who have done very well. They have been Christians all their lives. They wonder what had really happened.
Yeah, like there's no one I saw, they ask themselves these questions, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is just that component of mental makeup. The brain chemistry has an affinity to substance abuse if it is introduced.
Right, right.
So they can be very good not using for the longest period, but if the substance is introduced in the system. So families ought to. Also these days, fortunately, we have a lot of programs online. Yeah, just if I'm a family member, Google. I need help to understand. I do that a lot. Google parenting. This day, last week I was in church, and we were having a graduation ceremony for parenting skills. You know, keep changing from between age of 0 to 9, 9 to 14, 14 to 24. Parents need to update. I'm updating myself, by the way. I have a daughter who is 13, and of late she's really challenging me.
Oh, they do. That they do. They do, for real. But, you know, we've come to, you know, the end of this, and it's been very enlightening. And, you know, Kimberly, what would you like to, you know, tell our viewers, anyone who's going through this that would want to be on the other side of it, what would be your advice or final words on this conversation?
My advice for somebody who's in addiction right now is that there is hope. There is so much hope, and don't look back. What's lost is already lost. You can start a new life, and you just have to take it a day at a time, just slowly, pole, and you can really do it. You don't have to have any resource around you but yourself. You can pull yourself out of that hole. It just takes time, and it just takes belief, and it just takes, you have to also believe in a higher power. That's what I can say. And
that's what you said all through, like your accounts on social media and TikTok is you had a very strong belief in God, even though you went through what you went through, you still never give up on that aspect.
I've had to do it on my own, and I blame myself. I can't blame anybody for this path that is in front of me, because people don't understand. You know, families, I told you, it's a family disease. You can imagine the shame and they've gone through. You know, people tell them, I saw your daughter on the road, she was a chokora, she was homeless, she stole from me, she came to my house and took, you know, they're also going through their own thing. So I have had to walk this path on my own. It's not been easy, but I've held on so much to God. So I know the person who's going through this, who is completely alone, who looks left, right, back, center, and they're alone. I do get financial support for my family, I do. But as he mentioned before, addiction is an emotional pain that we're trying to cure. We're just searching for a cure. That's why we get into these drugs and alcohol, because we have so much pain emotionally. So the cure for that pain is love, you know. If you can't find that love around you, find that love through God. And you'll be fine.
All right, Kimberly, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And any final words, Boniface, but very briefly though?
Yeah, Kimberly, I really appreciate what you've said. In terms of love, I really feel you and support you and cheer you on as you do this. Yes. To any addict listening to me, just know that I'm 21 years clean. I have seen thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in recovery. We do get better, and our lives can change. We can stop using, we can find a new way of life, and we can really regain ourselves without using any substances.
Right.
To families also, I want to let them know that if you have a person who is addicted, get help for them. And as she also mentioned, I feel for those who cannot access the help that they require. I want to urge the government to set up the rehabilitation fund and help people who cannot afford treatment. It's been in our laws for 30 years. They should just really work on it. The president actually had said he was going to, as one of his campaign promises, set up the rehabilitation fund for people who cannot afford treatment of addictions. That should suffice.
All right. I want to appreciate you both. Thank you so much for coming in. Kimberly, for being brave and sharing with us your story. And Boniface for just giving us this information and your experience. I mean, it's something, because we don't assume that our viewers at home are just everyone is basically on the same path. Others are maybe struggling, and this conversation right here is very much needed. So Thank you once again. And for your feedback, we are so grateful. Let me just read 3. Simon says life has become very, very, very hard. And Sir Dominic DK says trying to maintain the balance between joblessness and stress. And Michael Jr. says life has been so hard. We hear you. We really do. But like Boniface said, sometimes trying to get into, rather getting into drug use makes it only worse. It just throws you into the fire, right? So I really pray that this conversation has been helpful to those of you watching, and we thank you so much for joining us this morning on Morning Vibe. And like I mentioned, it's Tuesday, so it's Wellness Wave. We'll see you again tomorrow, where we'll be discussing our relationships on Heart to Heart. So thank you so much for watching this morning.